Greetings, friends, patrons, country people. I'm So Say We All's Executive Director, Justin Hudnall.
And I'm Program Director, Jennifer Corley.
We do hope you've been enjoying some newly greenlit days in the outdoors, taking walks in parks, swimmings in beaches.
Verbally destroying a mother of two at Sprouts because her mask slipped off.
But between this potentially premature ease of the quarantine and the intolerable wave of virtue signaling we all know it's going to bring us on social media, tensions remain on the rise.
Protesters are filling the streets, workers are struggling, and parents are losing their shit.
So we hereby dub this clip show Unrest.
We all hope that we get back to seeing each other as soon as possible. But for So Say We All to get through this disaster and come back swinging as soon as it's all over, we need your help.
Between the cancellation of all of our live shows and our education contracts, we are losing thousands of dollars at a time, where we're having to spend even more in order to pivot our education programming online and to bring you live storytelling via streaming platforms, just like this one. So, in order to cover all of that cost, we are launching a critical need campaign with a goal of $10,000. And our beautiful, wonderful, illustrious Farts Rainbows community has already gotten us nearly 40% of the way there in just the first 3 days. But we need everybody's help to get all the way across that finish line. So please, open another tab in whatever browser you're watching this in right now and go to sosayweallonline.com/critical. You can make a donation in any amount. It will help us. Just please do it right now.
Imagine if you were at our live Vamp showcase tonight at the Whistle Stop. It would easily cost you $15 or $20 to get there, get in the door, and buy a drink or two. Well, if you could spare that much or more, it would help So Say We All keep storytelling going through this crisis and afterwards.
And just in case you go forgetting what that link was, don't worry, it's written in the stream description in the text box right below our faces.
And now to kick off the clips, we are going to start with the wonderful Kendall Burdett, who came to us through the encouragement of his college instructor, and we are so glad he did. This is his performance of his story, You Don't Have to Be Like This, from 2019's Vamp Showcase Extra.
So say we all!
Part of an effective recovery program is making amends for the wreckage of my past, taking accountability for damage caused, physically, financially, emotionally, and going to any lengths to change everything and never falling back into old destructive behaviors. One of the other conflicted relationships I had was with the law. And by that I mean I had broken it. Quite a lot. Some people who are heavy drinkers might have some experience with blacking out. They might drink a little too much, party a little too hard, and wake up the next day and look at their phone and say things like, oh, apparently I thought I should text all of my exes last night. Or they look at their receipts and they might say, oh, I guess I bought shots for the entire bar. Or they might even say something like, these are not my pants. Whereas an alcoholic might come out of a blackout and say, wait, what day is it? Or what city is this? Or whose car am I driving? Now, I'm not saying that all drinkers are alcoholics. And I'm definitely not saying that all alcoholics come out of blackouts while currently driving a car that they've clearly stolen in a city that they don't remember driving to, in addition to having some active warrants out for their arrest and almost 100% certain that these are not their pants. These are my pants. My point is that when it came time to make legal amends to the court, to turn myself in, the court responded as many friends and loved ones did when I made amends to them. We're glad you're finally doing the right thing. Thank you for paying us back. We're excited for this new chapter of your life. We missed you. The law, in fact, missed me so much they decided to just keep me for a while. And so I began what turned out to be a personal and intimate 45-day immersive tour of the Southern California correctional system. Jail is many, I'm not Jane Fonda. In my head. Jail is many things. It is harsh reality. It is lonely. It can be enlightening. It is scary at times. It can be surprisingly clean. It has its own version of fun activities sometimes. Think of like Boy Scout camp, but less strict and better food. Jail does, of course, have felons, junkies, gangsters, maniacs, but then again, so did my scout camp. I shared a small cell with two very large men, Glenn and Gonzo. Glenn was Korean and introduced himself as a former white supremacist. Is he here? I wanted to know more about this distinction, but his neck tattoos had a detailed and specific DIY quality to them that I felt that it would be unwise to pull that thread. Gonzo was an older Latino gentleman. A self-proclaimed retired gangster. And when I made an awkward attempt at humor, I asked him if that retirement came with a robust 401k. He didn't really appreciate the joke. He did, however, give me a convincing account of some of his more prominent scars and stab wounds. I was compelled to take him at his word. I came to know Glenn and Gonzo as good, honest men who at some point have become who'd become very lost. Our country's for-profit prison system is filled to overflowing with good people who want to change, who want to rehabilitate, who want to get better, who want to be better, and don't have always the resources available to do so. One of the biggest challenges the incarcerated face is fighting off the urge to embrace the hopelessness, to give up, and to give in to what can be an overpowering perception of futility. I make mention of their race because everything in jail is separated and organized by race. Whites, Latinos, Asians, blacks, etc. Everything in jail is self-regulating. Races police their own. Deputies get involved only when things get very out of hand, basically meaning if there is a fight. And if there is an altercation, if there is an altercation, everyone tends to get in trouble. If a fight breaks out between inmates of different races, things become very tense. A few nights after I was with them, Glenn and Gonzo, it became very clear they didn't like each other. One evening, an argument ensued. It got very heated. Other inmates started to gather. Before I realized what I was doing, I found myself leaping to my feet and getting right in between them. I should point out that I have broken up exactly one fight in my life, and that was in my 6th grade marching band between the first and second chair sousaphone players. Sousaphone players mean business. For real. Now, because there is nothing about me... There's nothing about me that necessarily says prison physique. So the absurdity of me standing between them and startled them into momentary silence. I found myself saying something I had heard a very long time ago, only once. Stop. Violence is wrong. You don't have to be like this. I'm not sure if I did the neck thing, but... And then they stopped. We all sort of looked at each other and understood. We were standing there in this awkward sort of prison silence. The crowd dispersed and they were looking at me expectantly, so I said, well, guys, fucking hug it out. And they did. And then a really weird thing happened. We became friends. We opened up to each other. We talked about all of our mistakes together. We laughed, we prayed together, we started a nightly poker game and split the profits because the house always wins together. Ramen, we were playing for ramen, but we connected and we bonded. No conflict was needed. We found a better way to be. When we were young, I went out of my way to irritate and pester my little sister, and now I go to places and cry in public. And I go out of my way to be more like her. Thank you.
First timer, Kendall Burdett, everybody.
Your next performer comes from San Diego City College, which is part of our Education Outreach Network. We love doing these shows. These are fan favorites. You never know what you're going to get, and it's truly the next generation of storytellers. You cannot go to one of these shows and not leave affected and really, really hopeful. So this is Vi Wen, our good friend from the San Diego City College 2015 showcase, Taking a Stand. Enjoy.
I remember a cool morning when I was about 9, getting ready for school, in our peach house that sat on a street lined with jacarandas in a suburb of San Diego. This was before I knew what suburbs were and thought everywhere was more or less like where I lived. After my little sister was born, we moved from a rented house on Central Avenue in City Heights to this one on the eastern edge of the city. Here, we had a backyard that was not shared with another house. There was no blackened gum splotching the sidewalks. There were no alleys. There was no temple with a turtle pond and lion statues that I could walk to with Banoit, my dad's mother, who still stayed with us and had to make do with an altar erected in the backyard with cinder blocks. My classmates were mostly white and had grown up speaking English. They didn't come over to our house like they did with each other's. We knew that we were not like everyone else. Our clothes did not fit as well. Our vacations never involved Disneyland, and we did not have a lot of new toys or cable television. My siblings and I were strange kids. Yet we somehow managed to make friends. After learning English in kindergarten, I had become a talker and often got in trouble during class, laughing at jokes whispered by the person sitting next to me. In fact, I felt socialized and comfortable and smart enough, I decided to run for a student government office in 5th grade. Since I always did well on spelling tests, I wanted to be class secretary. That morning at the dining table, I was looking over my campaign poster, which would be displayed alongside many others on a fence facing the playground for a few days leading up to the vote. I had misspelled secretary, which was totally embarrassing. I rolled up the poster, planning to fix it in a teacher's classroom once I got to school. Beyond this small worry, I do not remember much else of that morning. The next moment, I was standing in our kitchen in shock as much as pain. I stared down at the yellow tiles, familiar tears forming. I do not remember what small thing was said or what tone I might have said it in. Peeking up at my father's face, I must have made some reply, a retort or an appeal. Whatever it was, he struck me several more times with his palms. Each time his hand drew back, the fingers curled and flexed like claws. My back hunched under the blows. I'd been struck before, but always with an object. Clothes hangers and yardsticks meant punishment was meted out at a distance. Something about my father using his bare hands was more hurtful, even if it was less forceful. You know when you're crying and you're more upset about how you can't stop, so you cry even harder? It's a pitiful, positive feedback loop. A loss of control, a loss of breath. I felt my face distorting, melting a little, and I was aware that I looked as awful as I felt. "Stop crying," my father yelled. He didn't like to see us crying, and especially not when we were being punished. "Get in the car." We were now running late. I stuffed my sniffles inside and climbed into the van with my brother and sister. The silence made the 5-minute car ride seem like a whole morning. I sat in the back seat, clenching my mouth to keep things from accidentally coming out. I tried thinking of things to distract myself, to help me get back to normal. What had it been like before that happened? I remembered the poster. It was rolled up, clamped in my hands. Yes, I needed to fix the poster because I had made a mistake. We were dropped off. I tugged the sliding door of the van closed and went to the teacher's room, which I knew would be open with markers inside. On my way out, I saw my friend. She approached me and called out, "Good morning. How are you?" "I'm okay." I lifted the poster with a tight smile. As we were attaching the poster to the chain-link fence, I cracked into choking and sputtering tears. I could not stop thinking of my father's face earlier, our proximity. We had been close enough to hug. My friend kept asking what was wrong, and I couldn't tell her. The words would not come out, and even if they did, I don't think she could have understood. I had never asked any of my friends, but I was sure their families didn't do that to them. She got a teacher. I was taken to the principal's office, where I spent the rest of that day waiting. People I'd never seen before sat me down at a desk and asked me questions about my family. A group of adults asked me to stand on a table and remove my clothes so they could examine my skin. My tears had dried. I was calm, complying with what was asked of me without knowing where it would lead. I responded like I was taking a reading comprehension test, relaying the facts as best I could recall. There was a tape recorder. The principal spoke with me in a concerned, soft voice. The shuffling of people sharing knowing looks made it seem like something was happening, but I did not understand exactly what that was. It was an unsettling dream, and I was waiting for the end. When I went home, I told no one about going to the principal's office. I forgot about it. One day, the doorbell rang. A white woman came. The children left to play while she talked to my dad. I caught a glimpse of him slumped on the edge of a black vinyl couch. He looked smaller than I'd ever thought possible. It didn't feel right. Outside, the purple jacaranda flowers had fallen in the front yards and in the streets, getting crushed to a sticky, bruised layer on the sidewalks. We usually wandered several blocks away when we played, but today we stayed near. My brother and sister were scared, and they asked me what was happening. I felt sick and said that some people in the principal's office had talked with me about our family, about Dad. Why did they talk to you? They asked. Because I was crying. Admitting it felt like a weakness, like I had let them down. After an entire afternoon, the woman left and we came inside. My dad was quiet. I was afraid to look at him. Several days passed before it became clear. The woman had threatened my dad with removal of the children, but if he stopped hitting us, we would get to stay. They could have taken us away, my sister cried to me. I don't want to live with other people. These are our parents, said my brother. Well, they're not taking us away, and now we don't get hit anymore, I said, but I wasn't sure of either. I was afraid for the next time we were in trouble. How would we be punished? Would my dad forget in his temper and hit us anyways? And if he did, should I report it or say nothing? Did I really want to be taken away from my parents, separated from my brother and sister? As bad as it was sometimes in our house, I couldn't imagine anyone else loving us. The lady's words hung over us, protecting and threatening us at the same time. I could sense the anger my siblings never stated. I had betrayed our family. I had let in a stranger sent by the school who didn't understand how our family was different. Our house was Vietnamese. We had our own way of doing things. Even if some of those things made me feel terrible, it was even scarier to think about not having a family anymore. Instead of being relieved by the promise of protection, I felt guilt and shame for exposing my family. I was responsible for how small my dad had looked sitting on that black vinyl couch. I was afraid for him, but also of him. I doubted the ability of a social worker's words to completely change how he would act toward us. I wondered if any of my friends would ever have to think about these things. Outside our house, I did not know a single person who could understand. We told no one. Inside our house, we did not talk with one another. What's happening? What do I feel? What do you feel? And are you okay? The beatings stopped, but there are intangible ways you can be hurt so bad you'd swear they were physical blows. I felt trapped and alone. In my last year of high school, I thought my only escape was to kill myself. It wasn't until I was in college, talking with others who had survived, that I confirmed we had not been alone. For many Asian children with immigrant parents, physical punishment was normal. With distance, I can laugh about it, outbidding my friends in the contest of whose parents were stricter. Yet, I still cannot speak to my siblings about our specific experiences. Our shared trauma bound us together in a strange, silent complicity. By never talking about it with one another, we never had to fully answer the question, am I okay? Because we were not okay, but saying it would have been too painful. Saying it meant that something was wrong and that we were powerless to do anything about it. My father had never been taught how to love without hurting those he loved or himself in the process. Whatever things he had experienced translated into long silences which filled our house, broken only by outbursts of anger. Today, my family is still fumbling to recover. I'm finding that my own communication consists of silence and anger. I'm afraid that I will become someone who doesn't know how to love without hurting. That I was hurt myself is not an excuse, but a determinant. I am conditioned for hurt, a fate I am fighting to break. It starts by saying something, even if it is just to myself. Thank you.
Give it up for Ivy Newen.
One of the things we love about So Say We All is that often a person will start out as a volunteer or a performer on the VAMP stage, and they'll grow with the organization from there, often becoming a coach or even a producer. And that's what happened with our next performer. She started out getting into the VAMP showcase and then became a fabulous writing and performance coach. So this is Jordan Coburn, a wonderful comedian, and this is her story, Thanksgiving, from the 2018 VAMP showcase.
Hold it. Party foul.
Party foul.
We're
Fuck me.
gonna use that one.
It was the first Thanksgiving I had ever offered to host, so I probably shouldn't have been sitting on the beach in a hole that might have been the bed of a homeless man, smoking a joint with my older sister, while everyone else was inside setting the table. My table. But trust me, it was necessary. My sister and I finished the joint, stood up, and started the walk back to my house. I was flailing my arms around, trying to get the weed smell off my jacket, and was certain it was making a difference. It wasn't. Allison and I are 7 years apart, and had grown closer over the last few years. She's my half-sister. Her dad, who she now exclusively refers to as bio-dad, was, predictably, only a father in the literal sense of the word. He lived in another state and only wanted to see Allison if he was sick of paying child support and felt like attempting another round of suing my mom for custody. A true piece of garbage. My mom was pretty brutal sometimes, but he was ruthless. I'll never forget the day of Allison's 16th birthday. She had recently returned home from a failed runaway attempt to her bio-dad's house in Sacramento. Allison had woken up that morning to a package addressed to her from him. Allison opened the box, and inside of it were all of her belongings that she had left at his house, and a note that said he never wanted to see her again. I wish I never had to see the look she had on her face that day. But as she got older and her life progressed the way that it did, all I had to do was think of that face, and I would remember exactly why things turned out the way they did. I didn't hear from or of my sister when I was between the ages of 13 and 16. My mother told me that Allison had gotten into some bad things. My mother withheld information from us in an attempt to protect us, she said. Just when I was starting to accept that I might never know what Allison had gotten herself into, my questions were answered by a drunken faux pas of a close family friend. My mother's lifelong friend, Kathy, was hosting a dinner party. I hated going to those parties. Just a bunch of ladies talking shit on their ex-husbands, drinking wine, and hovering over the kitchen island like it was a cauldron they were preparing their spouse-hating spells in. I grabbed a Coke and headed into the enormous backyard to find Kathy's son, Alexander, hanging out drunk in the jacuzzi. I sat on the side of the jacuzzi and started talking to Alexander, who was exactly Allison's age, and had spent much of his time with her growing up before I came around. We started chatting about the small stuff. How was school? How was gymnastics? Did I take the SAT yet? Then he asked, how's Allison doing? I roll my eyes and sigh, frustrated that I don't even know how to answer that question. Before I can think of anything to say, he blurts something out that changes everything. Isn't it so weird that you could just flip to Skinamax at night and see Allison? I froze and turned red in the face. Skinamax? I racked my brain trying to think of all of the possible things that seeing her on Skinamax could mean, other than the obvious. Alexander could see in my expression that he'd just told me something I wasn't supposed to know. My brain was in a state of frantic denial. What else could he be talking about? As my imagination ran tired, my mind crept toward a slow halt right on what I knew was the truth. My sister was doing porn. I was catatonic. It's something you think you'd never have to process. A kind of perversion in my head that had never been there before, and I was meeting it for the first time. I stood there and stood there. Who told you that? Your mom? Yeah, and your mom told her. Let me guess, was it over the kitchen island? I sighed. I felt such shame. I wasn't embarrassed of my sister. I was embarrassed of the family that raised her. The family that thought keeping her away from me and my little sister for years was the solution to the painful life that she had manifested as a result of the painful life she had lived. Sure, porn was bad, I guess. But was it really that bad? I didn't know the first thing about porn, let alone how I felt about my sister doing it. How does someone even start doing that? Is it safe? Is she okay? As soon as we got home, I told my mom that I had found out what Allison was doing, that I knew she was a porn star, that I didn't care, and that I wanted to talk to my sister. My mom took this all surprisingly well. I imagine she knew this day was coming soon, and now that it was here, her fight was over. Well, I'm sorry you had to find out, Jordan. As if she planned on me going my whole life without ever knowing. She gave me Allison's number, and I picked up the phone. Hey, I found out what you've been up to the last few years. I love you. What? Who told you? Alexander. That fucking piece of shit. Oh boy. Allison would never say that she has an anger problem, so much as she's just a very emotionally transparent person. I'm gonna fucking kill him, she says. Why? Mom should have told me. No, she was just trying to protect you. You should have found out from me and not this soon. I'm sorry, Jordan. I felt slightly betrayed to know that my mom and Allison were working together on this one, but after I began talking with Allison again, I started to realize why they both wanted to keep it a secret from me. I began to hear talk of 25-year-olds on Viagra, the logistical difficulties of doing scenes while on your period, that bitch named Ray that couldn't even fake an orgasm, and I hadn't even had my first kiss yet. I found myself thinking sometimes, man, I wish I never walked over to that jacuzzi. Neither of us would see Alexander again until this Thanksgiving dinner at my house this year. She hadn't seen him for over 6 years and had been nursing a livid grudge against him. While I knew that Alexander was going to be at this dinner, Allison did not. My mom had told me earlier that he was going, and I asked her if Allison knew yet. No, I haven't told her. She's a big girl. I don't need to make sure all things are in order for her to handle herself correctly. She needs to face the realities of the decisions she's made. Alexander didn't do anything wrong. She did. This seems so harsh to me. My mom knew that Allison had an anger management problem, and not telling her that he would be there was setting her up for failure. I had to tell her. That way she could get all of her emotions in order, and we could spare the conflict. But that was an ideal that I should have known was unrealistic. Allison's emotions were rarely rational. We were still walking back to my place and getting closer and closer to my front door now. The window for me to tell Allison that Alexander would be behind that door by the time we got back was closing. It was now or never. Hey, Allison, did Mom tell you everyone that was coming tonight? No. Why? I broke the news, and she flipped. What? Are you fucking joking me? Are you fucking serious? You know what? No. I'm glad he's here. Now I can kick his fucking ass. I lit a fuse that was shockingly shorter than I imagined. Her pace quickened and the palpable anger inside of her increased with each step she took. My plan of smoking pot to calm her down before this conversation was clearly backfiring. Fuck, did I give her a sativa? I was beginning to panic in anticipation of what was going to happen. My sister growled as she stomped 10 steps ahead of me, her chihuahua wearing a matching jacket in hand. I hope he's eaten already because that motherfucker just had his last meal. At this point, she's reached my stairwell. I sprint desperately behind her, trying to make it to the door at the same time she does so I can play the role I always do, damage control. But alas, she gets there first. Allison busts open the door and storms in to see Alexander lounging on the couch, ignorant of what's coming his way. It was too late. I had to let this play out. It had been a long time coming. Fuck you, you fucking piece of shit. I fucking hate you. I'm gonna. Allison brings her hands up to Alexander's face and makes a furious strangling motion. Ugh! She shakes. Whoa, well, I can see that I've clearly upset you, Allison. You think? Wow, you're quick, dipshit. My mother and Kathy slowly walk into the living room from the kitchen. They observe for a moment, and then my mother speaks. Allison, calm down, sweetheart. She calmly says, as if Allison was actually the innocent, shaking chihuahua sitting on the couch next to her, and not the screaming maniac in front of her. Calm down? Oh, that is rich. I'm sure you'd like that, wouldn't you, Mom? Yes, I would. Let's not do this here, sweetheart. Come here. My mom slowly walks up to Allison the way Steve Irwin approaches a crocodile. She puts her hands around her arms and guides a screaming Allison into my room. Alexander begins meeting his wide-set eyes with everyone in the room, seeing if there's any insight he can gather from anyone. I really don't understand. What was that all about? Kathy shrugs her shoulders and gives a disapproving shake of the head as she looks to the room. Alexander then looks at me. What was that? She's still pissed about you telling me about her work. What? Yeah, you were the one who first told me what she was doing. Really? I don't even remember that. She does. I get up to go and meet Allison and my mother in my room. Allison is frantic. She puts her head into her hands and begins to weep. I looked at my mother's face and saw an emotion I hadn't yet seen whenever this subject came up before. Compassion. I didn't think my mother had it in her when it came to this. I expected her to be mad at Allison for causing such a scene, and she wasn't. She was the opposite of mad. All of the years I had witnessed her reeling in anger now revealed themselves as moments of what happens when fear and love meet. My mother and sister like to think that they're very different from one another, but their scars are much more similar than they realize. Two beautiful souls sucked dry by emotional leeches that don't deserve to be in their thoughts for even a second, but somehow their abuse left them with a subconscious feeling that the leeches are all they need for them to be whole again. I slowly walked over to the both of them holding each other and latched myself onto them. Through the tears, Allison mutters, I'm sorry. It's okay, sweetie. I just need a minute. My mom and I walked out of the room. Alexander asks us, Can I talk to her? You can try. Alexander walks into my room to meet Allison. The rest of the group stays put and turns their ears to the door, waiting for the sounds of alley cats to bellow from the room. But there was only silence. I sat on the couch, hoping and wishing that Allison could pull through and make amends, that she could remain strong and tie up one more loose end on the untangled fabric that had become her life over the last few years. I knew that she wanted peace. There was just so much inside of her that prevented her from attaining it. After a long 5 minutes, we hear the door creak open. The two slowly walk out of the room, shoulder to shoulder, Allison wiping tears from her eyes. Alexander pats her on the back and says something one final time that I imagine he'd said many times while in that room. I'm sorry. It's okay. Allison slowly walks herself into the center of the living room. The fact that she was now calm baffled me at first, but then I remembered that she has always had a knack for this, calming down as quickly as she riled up. 6 years of anger, resolved in 2 minutes. That's the kind of person my sister is. Before anyone could even fully process what had happened, Allison walked into the room that we were anxiously waiting in and picks up her dog, tucks her under her arm, lets out a final sigh, and makes a final sniffle. Then says, Okay, let's eat. Thank you.
Hey there, we just want to remind you to head over to sosayweallonline.com/critical and make a donation. Help us maintain our programming, our writing and performance coaching, and our workshopping.
I personally hope you've been doing your due diligence as a freedom-loving American who eats freedom for breakfast every day by enjoying and listening to our sister program, Incoming, the podcast and public radio show that allows veterans to tell their true stories in their own words, straight from their own mouths. Our new season is already out on podcast, available wherever you do your podding or at our home NPR station, kpbs.org/incoming. And we're hitting KPBS's airwaves here in San Diego this Friday, May 1st at 8 p.m. That's FM 89.5 KPBS. Give it a listen and tell us what you think.
For 6 years now, So Say We All has been soliciting true stories from veterans near and far and helping them get their work published and performed on stage. And not just through VAMP either. We've collaborated with La Jolla Playhouse, and our writers have gone on to win residencies, have their work published in magazines and journals, and even win national writing awards.
One of our star veteran writers, Adam Stone, we first met at the San Diego City College VAMP Showcase Borderlines way back in 2014. When he and I were workshopping his piece, he told me that he'd like to punch me in the face, but then went on to kill it on stage and become a great friend to me, this whole organization, a prolific and published writer, and a coach to many other veteran writers since. So here's Adam Stone with his first So Say We All story, Oblivion.
Through my scope, I see him standing there, on the brink of oblivion. I imagine he is contemplating his existence, whether to take that step. He sways with the mild wind, allowing its breeze to caress him like a mother rocks her child. He looks over his shoulder, as if to see if someone was there. There is no one. I imagine he is alone in this world, and this is his only way. As he turns, the look in his eye has changed. No longer is it fear, but that of determination. He takes the step. I lean closer as if able to stop him. I scream in my head for him to go back. I instinctively reach out as though I could push him back from 500 yards away. I close my eyes, cringing at the anticipation of the commotion that is about to occur. Deafening silence. I strengthen in my resolve and look back through the scope, watching him walk towards me. I have trained for 20 years to survive in a combat situation, how to fight, how to read others, to determine if they are a threat. I've trained for decades to strengthen my mind and body. I've mastered the art of hand-to-hand combat. I can accurately shoot my rifle and sidearm with near pinpoint accuracy. I have learned to numb my emotions by the loss of my closest friends and seeing what my own rifle can do to the enemy. I can shoot a man in the center of his chest from 500 yards away and put a knife through his throat so close I can count the number of cavities in his mouth. I've gone through psychological profiles before and after every combat tour to ensure that I can still be considered sane. As he walks towards me, all my years of training, my decades of experience vanish like smoke in a breeze. I was lost in a sea of emotion. There he was, a child, no older than my own 13-year-old son, walking towards me, but not to me. He was walking to a discarded vehicle left in the middle of an ancient minefield, a leftover from a past war, a constant reminder of the horrors this country has seen. He walks with purpose, knowing that if he makes it to that Charlotte Hulk eroding in the sand, he might be able to find something to sell to the Taliban. He knows that the price is high. The bigger the item, the more destructive it can be, the better off he will be. An old artillery shell can feed him for a month, but anything can feed him for a day, possibly a week. He knows that the Marines 500 yards away are authorized to shoot and kill anyone they deem a threat. His livelihood depends on what he finds, just as the weapon he wears across his back is his way to survive. He's been raised here, and he knows that there is safety in the field that has seen so much death. Many have tried before him. The field is strewn with signs of those who have failed. Shreds of cloth there, a crater there, even a shoe or two scattered about. He knows that where death once was, he is safe, because a landmine can only explode once. He arrives at a crater and jumps inside, resting for a moment, kneeling down as if to pray to his God to give him strength to continue on to his journey. As he hunkers down into the depression, I see my own children playing at the beach, building sandcastles, playing with each other, laughing and running into jump holes. Not much different than the hole I see the child resting in now. Only 300 yards from my position. From this distance, I can easily hit the target. The wind is blowing slightly from right to left. The sun is behind me, erasing all shadows of my target. In actuality, it would be an easy shot and be justified under the rules of engagement. As I sight in on the boy, I make the appropriate adjustments to my rifle. I firmly grasp the pistol grip, pulling it slightly toward me, ensuring the stock of the weapon is comfortably in the pocket of my shoulder. I rest the barrel of my weapon in the palm of my forward hand, allowing it to just lay there until the moment is necessary. My trigger finger hovers next to the trigger, waiting. My position is perfect. No one will question why I pulled the trigger. I would more than likely get a few good jobs and wow from the younger, less seasoned Marines who talk openly about seeing action and wanting to shoot something other than a paper target. Young Marines that have been raised in front of a television screen playing modern warfare in simulated wars around the world, who also tend to treat life just as another simulation. But there is no reset button, no pause, and no cheat codes. I hold my position, watching the target with my finger next to the trigger. He lifts himself out of his hole and stands on the threshold, his prize a mere 50 yards away. But it might as well be 100, 1,000, or 10,000 yards, for the distance isn't the problem. It's what's between and underneath. He takes the step and begins to walk again. As he moves, his eyes are vigilant, shifting, searching for any tell of possible danger. Nothing can be seen. Footstep after footstep, his body tenses that it might be his last. I can see him clearer now. The sweat on his brow, the dirt on his face, and even the beginning of manhood as a slight wispy mustache is starting to darken above his lip. I can also see he is no stranger to war. A ragged scar runs from where his left ear should be to the corner of his mouth. He is missing 2 fingers from his left hand, and I postulate that the entire left side of his body is battle damaged in some way. Possibly the effects of a landmine he was fortunate to walk away from. More than likely, as I have seen too many times, when he was an infant, his mother shielded him from the danger, protecting him with her own body, leaving scars as a reminder of her love. I watch closely. He is just 25 yards away. His pace is slow and methodical, choosing each step carefully. I again reminisce of my children when I send them to bed for the evening. The slow, intentional walk down the hall, hoping a reprieve might come, allowing them to watch just one more show. No reprieve ever comes from me, nor will there be for the boy who rests squarely in my sights. He is only yards away from the fruit of his labors within his grasp. My body stiffens as he climbs into the mangled mass of the vehicle whose ancient armor shields him from my sight. The world envelops me. Behind me, I can hear the distant sound of music playing on a radio. Marines on a break from what lies outside our walls are playing cards to occupy their minds. The smell of baked chicken being prepared for the evening meal wafts up to me, and for a moment, I can relax and take in the world. Tick, tick, tick. The hours of the second hand slowly pass. When I see the boy exiting the vehicle, I am funneled back into the reality that lay in my sight. In his hands is a wooden box filled with miscellaneous wires and pieces of scrap metal, but resting on top is his personal fortune, a cylindrical-shaped object that resembles an old Soviet mortar shell. The boy doesn't waste any time. He begins crossing the field as fast as possible, attempting to retrace his steps that has brought him to his personal treasure trove. Thud, thud, thud. The emptying and filling of my heart is now keeping time. I tighten in my position to ensure I can get a clean shot. The boy has now become the enemy. Never mind the rifle he wears across his back. Every 6-year-old in this country has one. The mortar shell, if sold to the Taliban, can be used against the Marines and soldiers in the field. He moves quickly. I adjust for his speed. My finger slips into the trigger well, and I can feel the cold, warmth of the steel as I apply pressure. My weapon is ready. He reaches the cradle where I imagine him praying and abruptly stops. He's frozen. Not a muscle is moving. Can he feel the barrel of my rifle bearing down on him? He's motionless. Beads of sweat roll down the back of his neck. He's breathing heavy. He stands for what seems like eternity. Click. I apply more pressure to my trigger. He slowly lowers the box of goods down from his chest and looks up towards the sky. Click. I place my thumb on the safety, ready to unleash the dogs of war. He takes one more step. Boom! The outpost siren is wailing, and every Marine from around the compound stops what they are doing and rushes to the perimeter with rifles in hand to defend our position. It takes the cloud of sand and debris from the explosion 10 minutes to finally settle. After a few minutes, the all clear is sounded and everyone goes back to what they were doing. The music starts to play, the games continue, and I helplessly look out across the field of oblivion. A torrent of emotion swells. I am confused. Was that me? No. My weapon is still on safe. Where is the boy? He's gone. I am thankful it wasn't me. I didn't have to. I would have. I could have. This time, it wasn't my choice. My soul, though empty, is still intact. I am angry and demoralized. I understand why the boy made the trek. All this child wanted was to survive. I think of all the children who have crossed my path, the ones on the side of the road begging for change, the ones in the refugee camps and never-ending lines, even the ones who have stolen from me. They all had one thing in common, the will to survive. That boy was doing what he had to do to survive, looking for a way to survive for more than just today. Just so he wouldn't have to walk through a minefield tomorrow. I wonder how my own children would survive in a land as hostile as the one the boy lived in. Would they do what it takes? Wow. Thank you.
We hope all your pee-pee is in the toilet where it belongs, because you do not want to miss a second of this next performance. This is an epic screed from wordsmith and self-proclaimed nerd Dustin Markel. Here he is with his story, The Lines, from the 2019 Vamp Showcase, Home for the Holidays, Black Sheep.
I don't know if you've heard, but O.J. Simpson is on Twitter. He made a social media debut earlier this year and made minor news when he tweeted a video of himself ahead of the first presidential debates. There he was, in his living room, feet kicked up, commenting on the overcrowded field of Democrats, just like the rest of us. Since then, OJ has used Twitter mostly to complain about his fantasy football team and to dispense unironic advice to current NFL players on the virtues of keeping their cool. And he does all this with this blank affability that simultaneously announces and ignores the chilling fact that he is that O.J. Simpson. Now, in case the 90s weren't 10 years ago and you're too young to remember, O.J. Simpson is a former football star, film actor, and product spokesman who, despite that resume, is probably most famous for brutally, but allegedly, murdering 2 people in June of '94. His ex-wife, Nicole Brown, and Ron Goldman, a friend who happened to be at her home that night. The spectacle that followed was peak Los Angeles, complete with paparazzi, SC football, a freeway chase, and even a Kardashian. Trial coverage was ubiquitous, seeping into our conversation and entertainment, from SNL all the way down to my 8th grade talent show, where I wrote and performed an ill-advised but hella tight parody of Aerosmith's Walk This Way, entitled Run OJ. Even if you didn't follow the trial every day, you knew when the verdict was due. And no matter where you were at that moment, especially in LA, you were tuned in to catch the finale of this year-long Capodian true crime saga. My high school was no exception. Now, for context, my high school was literally straight out of a Bret Easton Ellis novel. It was located across town in the suburbs several miles from where I lived. So each day I took a bus from the set of California Love to the set of California Dreams. My first year there, I missed a week of school because of the 1992 LA riots. I returned to the relief and awe of an all-white classroom and confirmed that, yes, I was still alive. And yes, just over the hill, they, which is to say, we, really were burning that motherfucker down. For them, it had all been rumor. Something to do with the rap lyrics they weren't yet allowed to listen to. After all, the goal of suburban schools like mine, the goal of the suburbs in general, was to escape the unpleasantness of the urban, to keep such darkness at arm's length. Which made it all that more surprising when, on the morning of the OJ verdict, a TV appeared in the school courtyard, seemingly on his own, as though the trial itself had become sentient. It would not be denied our rapt attention. There had been no announcement from the faculty, no collective debrief, which was, to be sure, a ballsy move. Because not only was this trial about a horrific double murder, there were larger social implications as well. It had become a referendum on the LAPD, the de facto antagonist of the riots 3 years prior, and the antagonist long before that, if you were black in Los Angeles. And because OJ was black, and Nicole a pretty young blonde, both the relationship and the crime itself ignited familiar fears of black male sexuality and its constant threat to the virtue of white women. And so the trial threw an often uncomfortable spotlight on the simmering tensions between black and white Angelenos who literally and figuratively occupied separate spaces within the same city. This separation was made evident at my school that morning as we gathered around the TV. It wasn't until that last hushed moment, as we all leaned in to hear the verdict, that I realized that I was surrounded by the school's few black students. All of us huddled together in our own exclusive chocolate pocket. And when the foreman read the verdict, fumbling OJ's full name, we, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty in the crime of murder. Man, that chocolate pocket exploded. Into cheers and high fives, yelling like our team had scored the winning touchdown, which it had, in a matter of speaking. We'd all been watching a game, even if we hadn't always flexed our team allegiance. And on that morning, while the black students rejoiced along with black spectators around the country, I could sense those crowded around us throwing their heads back in guttural dismay and a newfound disgust. Though we'd all been classmates, friends, black and white, just moments before, our divergent responses had revealed the potential rift that had been there all along. My triumphant posture the rest of the day was met with dirty looks from cold blue eyes. One friend in biology class just turned and shook his head at me and asked how I could be so happy that a murderer had gotten away with it. At 14, I lacked a solid sense of history to satisfactorily answer that question. What I suspected, however, was that if he had been black, he wouldn't have had to ask in the first place. What I now understand is that my real crime, to the extent that I too was on trial that day, was that I hadn't held up my end of the bargain. Because, like Tony, the token brother from California Dreams, my role was to remind the audience that black people existed, not to remind them why there was only one in the cast. Of course, it's not the only time I failed to play my part correctly. I'm often called upon to serve as a credit to my race. I check a lot of boxes after all. I grew up hood adjacent, the child of a hard-working single black mother. I was a bona fide good kid in a mad city who spent more time in the Inglewood Library than these Inglewood streets. I collected a handful of college degrees on my way to becoming a college professor myself, where today I provide living proof that Black academia is alive and well. Moreover, I'm evidence that the slings and arrows aimed at our young black men are dodgeable, and that they too can emerge victorious on the other end. On occasion, I've been asked to talk to someone's troubled son or a wayward nephew struggling with school and home. I just know if he talked to a brother like you, their parents insist, attempting to tap into my apparent reserves of black excellence. I've had opportunities to speak before groups of young black men, to be a guide of sorts, to teach them how they too can walk through this life, a proper representative of the black community. But inevitably, what ensues is a performance of sorts. One that's required if I'm to garner some semblance of credibility among these brothers. The act demands that I add a little bass to my voice, and that I slow it down to a speed that connotes my cool. But the truth is, in reality, I'm not cool at all. Despite my ability to speak in front of large groups, I'm actually mad awkward. I lack the confidence, the semi-sexual swagger, the thick skin, the toughness, and, well, let's be honest, the height. And what comes to mind when you think of the ideal black man? Even before I was shipped off to school in the suburbs, I was always an odd little black boy, or sensitive, they used to say, with just a hint of pity. I was too into my drawings and Nick at Night reruns and making movies in my own head to bother with playing outside. And so I never really learned the language of outside. My poor mother just couldn't understand why I didn't want to hang out with the neighborhood kids and throw a ball around and sweat and shit talk like a normal boy. The truth is, it was because I dreaded, and still dread, the incredulous looks from my own people. The lip-smacking disappointment that follows the wrong response. That skepticism reserved for interlopers and carpetbaggers. I mean, the pain faces when I tell black people that I haven't been watching Power. And so I dance as fast as I can, learn the lines as soon as possible, and do my best not to break character. I mean, God forbid I let these brothers know how much of a fucking weirdo I really am. I mean, I can't let them know that I thought Black Panther was just that I refused to watch Roseanne without Roseanne. That no, I haven't canceled Kanye West, and that if anything, I've upgraded my subscription. That while I love hip-hop, rap music, if you catch me alone mouthing lyrics to myself, there's a pretty good chance that what I'm actually singing is Poor Unfortunate Souls from Disney. That while I haven't seen Power, I have seen every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've been to more bar mitzvahs than barbershops. And when you casually ask me about that game last night, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because while you had basketball practice back in high school, I had dress rehearsal for the Music Man. And so my interactions with black strangers, men in particular, are fraught with this attempt to hide. And my relationships with black people are often hindered by this feeling that I could have my membership revoked at any moment. I'm reminded of Halloween back in 2008. There were these posters hanging all over with posters all over of then candidate Obama with the caption, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" An allusion to the 1960s film in which a white girl brings her black fiance home to meet her supposedly liberal parents. What they all learn in the end is that it's easy to have an open mind behind closed doors. It's a different story when that color line is in your face, in your neighborhood, in your classroom, or in your home. That Halloween, I'd gone to this house party thrown by a friend of a friend. As usual, my costume was some configuration of what I already owned. In this case, a shirt and tie, gloves, and a do-rag that I wore as a mask to cover my whole face. Just who or what was I supposed to be? I don't know. And neither did anyone else at the party. Though they all had their guesses. Nor did they realize that I was black. My skin was hidden after all, and the name Dustin certainly doesn't give anything away. But once I removed my gloves and lifted my mask enough to enjoy a slice of pizza, I was met with everyone's poorly hidden reassessment of who I was, and moreover, who they were in relation to me. I'm not saying that I suddenly had to drink from a separate stack of Solo cups, but greetings of dude were immediately replaced with bro. Guesses about my costume now included the Black Zorro, or the Black Invisible Man, or the Black Spider-Man that one scene. Exposed, I had ceased to be just another party guest. I had taken on a familiar role, one that was being decided for me. And maybe that's what it means to be black in this society, is to have your part handed to you without an audition. To be cast in a narrative that somebody else has written about themselves.
Yeah.
Nearly 30 years after the LA riots, sparked by the excessive beating of Rodney King at the hands and feet of the LAPD and the subsequent acquittal of the officers involved, We find ourselves in a new renaissance of police brutality against black victims. Social media has made it easier, even mandatory, to report and comment on the growing list of incidents and to comment on the comments until we lose ourselves in a spiral of virtue signaling. Recently, as the names of victims racked up, Oscar Grant, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Walter Scott, just to name a few. I once again join the righteous noise of black rage, resentment, and fear. And once again, as on the morning of the OJ verdict, I was admonished for my response from white friends who were uncomfortable with my tone. One wondered whether my anti-police posts were helpful. Another wondered whether I stopped to think how my anger made him feel. Conversely, on other occasions, I've been condemned by black folks online for my insufficient indignation for breaking political ranks, dismissed as just another casualty of the sunken place for my lukewarm stance on the community threat du jour. I often find myself at the mercy of someone else's expectations and urged to make a choice to follow a prescribed set of cultural criteria to draw a definitive line. But, like Buffy at the end of season 7, torn between Angel and Spike, I have to learn to reject my confinement and to see my life as more than a reflection of the lives of others. I advise you all to do the same, because this identity crisis is not mine alone. In the meantime, try not to be offended by everything you hear, every word you read, and to immediately see what makes you uncomfortable as an affront to your existence. Because no matter what, if you search a little harder, you can always find something worse to hate on the internet. After all, O.J. Simpson is on Twitter.
Welcome back. If you've enjoyed your time with us tonight, if you've been a performer on our stage ever, if you've learned something truly valuable in one of our education workshops, now's your chance to give back. Please go on over to sosayweallonline.com/critical and click donate. If we can wake up tomorrow a little closer to our $10,000 goal, it'll really help us feel like a Friday is actually a Friday again.
Well, our Unrest episode of the Vamp Clip Show is coming to a close. We thank you so much for tuning in and chatting with each other and us. We miss you so much, and we can't wait to see you again in person, even if it is with masks on.
Until then, please give us what you can. Even one small 1,000 will do.
The tiniest of hundreds.
The itty bittiest of tens. Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you. Take care.
Miss you.